She stood alone at the corner of a crowded street in Lagos. Rain poured from the gray morning sky, soaking her thin dress and torn slippers. In her arms, a baby, wrapped in nothing but a piece of cloth, whimpered weakly from hunger and cold. People rushed past, umbrellas shielding them, eyes avoiding hers. Some glanced. Most didn't. She whispered softly, "Please, just small food for my baby." But no one stopped. 2 men stood nearby, watching. One said, "Why is she just standing there in the rain?" The other scoffed, "Maybe it's all an act. Some people rent babies just to beg." She heard them. She said nothing. She gently rocked her daughter, her voice cracking, "Don't cry, Julia. Mommy will find food today. I promise." What she didn't know was that help, unexpected, life-changing help, was only moments away. Inside a sleek black SUV stuck in the usual morning traffic of Lagos, sat a man whose life looked perfect from the outside. His name was Dominic. CEO. Billionaire. The kind of man whose name opened doors, whose watch cost more than what some people earned in years. Today was an important day. His company was on the brink of sealing a major international partnership. A meeting was scheduled with foreign investors, a meeting that could double his empire's reach across Africa. His assistant had called twice already to remind him, "Don't be late. They're already in town." Dominic sat quietly in the back seat, dressed in a tailored navy suit, scrolling through emails on his phone. The driver inched the car forward through the dense traffic, horns blaring from every direction. Outside the windows, Lagos moved fast, loud, chaotic. But Dominic barely noticed. This was routine. His life was structured, goal-driven, always advancing. And then, something shifted. A flash of movement outside the window made him pause. He looked up. Through the raindrops on the glass, he saw her. A woman. Thin. Still. Soaked. Holding a small bundle in her arms. The crowd moved around her like she was invisible. Her dress was drenched, clinging to her body. Her hair matted to her forehead. Her hands cradled the bundle, a baby, no more than a few months old. Dominic leaned forward, eyes narrowing. The woman wasn't moving. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't holding a sign. Just standing. Quietly. In the rain. Asking for help. And that stillness, that silence, struck him harder than anything. He saw how tightly she held the baby. Not like someone begging for money, but like a mother trying to shield her child from a world that had forgotten her. Her back was slightly curved, her knees weak. He could tell she hadn't eaten. And the baby, the child was so still. Dominic's heart beat slower. Something inside him stirred. Something unfamiliar. He had passed hundreds of people on the street before. Poverty wasn't new. But this was different. This wasn't someone asking for a handout. This was someone on the edge of life, quietly screaming for mercy. "Stop the car," he said suddenly. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror, surprised. "Sir, I said stop. Now." The SUV rolled to a halt by the side of the road. Horns honked behind them in protest, but Dominic didn't care. He opened the door. The cold rain hit him instantly, darkening his suit and slicking back his hair. He stepped into the street, into the rain, into the unknown, and walked straight toward her. Hannah didn't notice the man at first. She was focused on Julia. The baby's lips were dry. Her tiny body trembled in her mother's arms. Hannah tried to hum a lullaby, but her voice broke halfway through. Her stomach ached. Her hands were numb. Her body was there, but her soul was slowly slipping away. Then she felt a presence in front of her. Someone was standing close. She looked up. A tall man. Soaked from the rain, but not shivering. His eyes met hers. Calm. Focused. Not judging. Just present. "Good morning," the man said gently. Hannah didn't respond. She wasn't sure how to. She hadn't spoken to someone who truly saw her in days. He pointed to the baby. What's her name? Hannah hesitated, then whispered. Julia. Dominic took a step closer, looking at the child's fragile face. The baby's eyes were barely open. Her cry was more breath than sound. Has she eaten? Hannah shook her head. No, sir. Not since yesterday. He nodded slowly. Looked at her soaked clothes. The broken straps of her slippers. The way she held herself like a wounded bird. And you? Have you eaten anything? She looked down. Embarrassed. No, sir. But it's okay. I just want to find food for my baby. Dominic paused. There was silence between them, not the awkward kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that wraps around two people when something sacred is unfolding. Come with me, he said quietly. Hannah's eyes widened. Sir. Come. Let me help you. She froze. This man. He looked like someone from a television screen. His suit, his watch, his polished shoes, now splashing in puddles. He didn't belong here. And people like him never stopped. So why was he standing in front of her? She looked into his eyes again. They were steady, kind, real. And then she looked at Julia, now barely able to cry. Her decision was made. She nodded. Dominic guided her gently to the car. The driver opened the door, eyes full of questions but saying nothing. Hannah stepped in, clutching her child. She sat at the edge of the seat, careful not to touch anything. She looked around, the leather, the silence, the clean scent, it felt like another world. Dominic stepped in beside her. The car started moving again, but inside, the silence was thick with thought. He handed her a small towel from the seat. Here, he said. Use this for Julia. Hannah took it with both hands. Thank you, sir. She wrapped it around her baby gently, whispering soft thanks under her breath. What's your name? Dominic asked. Hannah. He nodded. Hannah, where do you live? She looked down. We don't have a home, sir. We sleep outside. Dominic's chest tightened. He didn't show it on his face, but something inside cracked. All right, he said. I'll take you somewhere safe. Hannah's head shot up. Really, sir? He nodded again. Yes. Somewhere warm and dry. You both need food and rest. She stared at him, eyes filling with tears. She looked away quickly and wiped her face. Thank you, sir. God bless you. He didn't reply, just looked out the window, deep in thought. The car weaved through the traffic. Dominic checked his watch. The meeting, he was already late. The foreign investors were probably waiting. This deal was worth millions. Months of preparation. His team would be furious. But he looked at Hannah again. Her soaked dress. Her trembling arms. And at Julia, slowly warming in her mother's lap. He made a decision. He leaned forward. Stop at the next restaurant, he told the driver. The driver didn't argue. He simply nodded. When they arrived, Dominic stepped out and opened the door for Hannah himself. People inside the restaurant stared as he walked in, this billionaire in a wet suit, with a soaked woman and a baby. But he didn't care. He ordered hot rice, fried plantain, chicken, and warm milk. They sat down at a table near the back. Hannah still held Julia. She looked unsure. Can I eat here, sir? She asked, almost afraid. Yes, Dominic replied. Please. Eat. She bowed her head in thanks, fed the baby first, then slowly began eating. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she chewed. She hadn't tasted food in 2 days. Every bite was like a prayer answered. Dominic watched silently. Something had changed in him. And he knew. This was no longer just a moment of kindness. This was a turning point, for both of them. Inside the small restaurant, the warmth was almost shocking. The walls glowed with soft yellow light, and the aroma of hot food filled the air. Fried spices, grilled meat, freshly cooked rice. It was a different world from the cold street outside. Hannah hesitated as she stepped in, her wet dress clinging to her legs, her baby still wrapped in the towel Dominic had given her. People glanced their way. A few whispered. One man looked her up and down, then turned back to his food. No one said anything out loud, but the looks said enough. She wasn't used to being indoors anymore. She wasn't used to being seen. Dominic didn't say a word to the people around them. He walked ahead, chose a table in the corner, away from the stairs, and waited for her to sit. Hannah walked slowly toward him, unsure of how to carry herself in a place like this. She sat on the edge of the chair like someone who might be asked to leave at any second. She held Julia close, rocking her gently even as the baby dozed in her arms. A waitress came, wiping her hands on a towel. "Good morning, sir," she said. "What can I get you?" "Rice, fried plantain, chicken, and warm milk for the baby," Dominic said. "And water." The woman blinked, looked briefly at Hannah, then nodded and walked away. Silence settled again. Hannah didn't speak. Her eyes stayed on Julia. Her hands never stopped moving, touching the baby's cheeks, adjusting the towel, whispering little prayers under her breath. Dominic sat across from her, watching. He had no idea who she really was, where she came from, what had brought her here. But he could see one thing clearly: she was a mother. And even in her suffering, her only focus was the child in her arms. That moved him more than anything. A few minutes later, the food arrived. The plates were steaming. A large portion of jollof rice, golden plantains, crispy grilled chicken, and a bottle of clean water. The waitress returned with warm milk in a bottle, which she handed gently to Hannah. "Can I eat here, sir?" Hannah asked quietly, still unsure. Dominic nodded. "Yes. Please eat." Hannah looked down at the food, then back at Julia. She adjusted her in her arms and gently brought the warm milk to her lips. Julia drank slowly, her tiny fingers clutching the bottle, her eyes fluttering half-closed in relief. Hannah's lips trembled. It had been over 2 days. 2 days since her child had swallowed anything warm. When Julia had taken enough, Hannah placed the bottle aside and looked at the food on the table. She reached for the spoon and began eating, slow at first, cautious, like someone who thought it might be taken away any second. She chewed in silence, her body shaking slightly, her shoulders rising and falling as tears streamed down her cheeks. She tried to hide it. But Dominic saw. She wasn't just hungry. She was broken. And this meal, simple as it was, had touched a wound that went far deeper than an empty stomach. Dominic didn't interrupt. He didn't ask questions. He just let her eat. When she was done, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and gently kissed Julia's forehead. She looked up at him, her voice thin and exhausted. "Thank you, sir. God bless you, sir." Dominic leaned forward slightly. "Tell me," he said, "what happened to you?" There was a pause. Hannah looked down at her lap. Her hands rubbed together. She seemed to weigh something in her mind, whether to speak or keep it locked inside like she always did. But something about Dominic, something about his stillness, his eyes, his quiet care, made her believe, maybe for the first time in a long time, that someone actually wanted to hear. And so, she spoke. Her story revealed. "My name is Hannah. I don't have anyone in this world," she began. "My parents died when I was a child. I grew up in an orphanage in Ibadan. It was not easy." She paused, and for a moment, she was no longer in the restaurant. She was back in that cold, crowded room filled with metal beds, where the older children stole food from the younger ones, where a good day meant your clothes hadn't been ripped or your shoes hadn't been taken. "I used to cry at night," she continued. "Sometimes I would pray for someone to come take me away. But nobody came. I learned to stop hoping. As I got older, I left the orphanage. There was no money, no family. So I started working, cleaning people's homes, washing clothes, cooking for strangers who barely spoke to me." Dominic listened closely, not interrupting, just nodding now and then, giving her space. Then, I met Jacob. Her voice softened. He was a taxi driver. He was kind. He would take me home after work sometimes without asking for fare. We talked. We laughed. He made me feel like I existed. Like I mattered. She smiled faintly, a memory flickering like a dying candle. We were together for almost a year. And then, I found out I was pregnant. Dominic shifted slightly, but still said nothing. I was scared. But when I told him, he smiled. He said he was ready. That we would get married. That we would be a family. She exhaled slowly. But he said he had to go back to his country first. To tell his parents. To do things the traditional way. He said he'd be gone for a week. Her voice cracked. That was the last time I saw him. Dominic sat up straighter. He left and never came back. Hannah nodded. His number stopped working. I went to where he used to live. He was gone. I asked his friends, but they all said they didn't know anything. Or maybe they were lying. I don't know. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I couldn't work anymore. Nobody wanted to hire a pregnant girl. The woman I was living with told me to leave. She said I was bringing shame to her home. She looked at Julia, who was now sleeping peacefully on her lap. I started sleeping outside. On benches. Under bridges. I begged. Sometimes people gave me food. Most times they didn't. She looked back at Dominic. I just wanted to survive until the baby came. And then I thought, maybe someone would help us. Maybe it would get easier. Her eyes welled again. But it didn't. Dominic stared at her, and for the first time in a long while, he felt helpless. Not because he lacked resources, but because the pain he was hearing had no quick solution. No investment or business deal could undo the kind of wounds Hannah carried. Still, he had to try. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick bundle of Naira notes. Quietly, he placed it on the table. Hannah's eyes widened. Sir, no. I can't take this. It's too much. Dominic shook his head. You need it. She looked at Julia, then back at the money. Her hands shook as she reached for it. She didn't count it. She just held it to her chest like it was something sacred. A key. A new door opening. Thank you, sir, she whispered. May God bless you. May He bless your children, your family. Dominic smiled faintly. But then he looked at his watch. His eyes widened slightly. The meeting, it had already started. He was supposed to be in that boardroom an hour ago. He stood up suddenly. I have to go. I'm late for something important, he said. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp business card. It bore his full name and contact details. He handed it to her carefully. This has my number. Call me after 3 hours. I'll come back. Wherever you are, I'll find you, and I'll take you somewhere safe. Hannah held the card as if it were made of gold. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Just a breath. Just awe. Dominic turned toward the door, already preparing himself for the storm of missed calls and frustrated emails waiting for him. But as he stepped outside and into the rain again, he felt something unusual. Peace. Because for the first time that day, maybe even the first time that year, he had missed a meeting not for business, but for something far more important. The rain had softened by the time Dominic stepped out of the restaurant. The streets were still busy, the city still pulsing with life. But in his chest, there was stillness, a silence that spoke louder than the noise around him. Back inside, Hannah remained seated, motionless, her eyes locked on the business card in her hand. She stared at it like it was a map out of the darkness she'd lived in for so long. Julia was asleep against her chest, warm now, fed, and calm. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Hannah didn't feel like a ghost floating through the world unseen. Someone had seen her. Someone had listened. She tucked the card into the fold of her cloth and whispered again, "Thank you, God, thank you." 3 hours later, the sun had broken through the clouds, leaving puddles of light on the streets. Hannah sat beneath a shaded kiosk near the same spot where she'd first stood in the rain. Julia slept peacefully in a sling across her chest. Hannah had bought a small bottle of water and a piece of bread using just a fraction of the money Dominic had given her. She didn't want to touch the rest yet, not until she knew it was real. Not until he came back. She stared at the phone booth across the road. She didn't have a phone, but she could ask. Maybe the kiosk woman would let her borrow one. But just as she stood up, she heard the low rumble of a car engine behind her. She turned, and her breath caught. The black SUV was back. Dominic stepped out, a different suit now, but the same calm look in his eyes. He smiled slightly as he walked toward her. "You waited," he said. Hannah nodded. "I didn't think you'd really come back, sir. I told you I would." She looked down at Julia. "She's better now. She slept." Dominic looked at the baby, then back at Hannah. "Come. Let me take you somewhere safe." They got into the car again. This time, Hannah didn't sit at the edge. She sat properly, more at ease, holding her daughter close but without the tight, panicked grip she used to have. There was still fear inside her, but it was softer now, not the kind that screamed but the kind that wondered. They drove for nearly 45 minutes, past the outer neighborhoods, past market areas, past people shouting and selling and laughing. Then the car turned down a quieter street, lined with trees and small buildings with wide porches. Dominic pointed to one ahead, a pale yellow house with a green roof and flowers on the balcony. "There," he said. "That's where you'll stay for now." Hannah looked at the house, her eyes wide. It was small, but beautiful, peaceful, safe. "Is it yours, sir?" she asked. He nodded. "It used to belong to my aunt. She passed away some years ago. I've kept it clean. You can stay here as long as you need." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her heart was too full. The driver parked, and Dominic led her inside. The house smelled of fresh linen and lemon soap. The curtains were clean, the floor polished, and on the kitchen counter sat a small welcome basket: rice, beans, powdered milk, bread, and soap. "Everything you need for now is here," he said. "There's water, electricity, and a phone you can use if you ever need to reach me." Hannah stepped inside like someone walking through a dream. She touched the doorframe, the kitchen wall, the curtain strings, just to feel it was real. Dominic handed her a small envelope. "There's enough money here for food for a few weeks. Tomorrow, I'll come back with someone. A woman who runs a shelter program. She'll help you get documents, open a bank account, maybe even help you find work if you're ready." Hannah took the envelope, hands trembling. "Sir, why are you doing all this? You don't even know me." Dominic paused. And for the first time, he spoke not like a businessman, but like a man who remembered something buried deep. "My mother," he said, "was once like you, before she met my father. She told me stories about how hard it was, how she begged on the streets with me on her back. I don't remember it, but she never let me forget where I came from. She said, 'One day, you'll have power. And when that day comes, use it to help someone who can't repay you.'" He looked at her. Today was that day. Hannah didn't know what to say. She placed the envelope gently on the table and took Julia into her arms again. Her lips trembled, and her voice was barely more than a whisper. "Thank you, not just for the house or the food, but for seeing me. For not looking away." Dominic smiled. He didn't stay much longer. He gave her one last instruction: rest. "You and Julia are safe now." And then left quietly, promising to return the next day. As the door closed behind him, Hannah stood in the living room holding her child. The sunlight came in through the window, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what the next day might bring. She laid Julia down on the soft bed in the corner room and kissed her forehead. Then she stepped into the small bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair was messy. Her eyes had dark circles. But for the first time, she saw someone who looked alive again. Someone who still had a story to live. That night, as Julia slept peacefully in the next room, Hannah knelt by the bed and prayed. Not for miracles. Not for riches. But simply, to never forget what kindness felt like. And to one day pass it forward. That day, one man's decision to stop changed the course of 2 lives forever. Dominic never posted about it. Never told the media. He didn't do it for praise. He did it because in the middle of the noise, he chose to listen to a quiet cry for help. And Hannah. She didn't go back to the street. She got help. She found work. She learned new skills. In time, she even began volunteering at shelters, helping other young mothers who had lost hope, just like she once had. One act of kindness changed everything. Not because it solved all problems, but because it reminded someone they were human. Worth saving. Worth seeing. So, if you're watching this, maybe today is your moment. Your chance to stop, to look, to act. Because you never know whose life is waiting on your kindness.